Horror movies. Some of us hate them, some of us, including myself, really love them. There's just something about them that draws us to them, especially slashers. Be it the killers, the suspense, or simply seeing how the victims manage to survive, or in many of their cases, how they die. Slasher films are incredibly popular. And with that popularity comes a common understanding of some of the genre's most common tropes. The one I want to discuss today is the final girl trope. You wouldn't have a slasher film without them. Laurie Strode, Gale Weathers, Nancy Thompson, Ellen Ripley, Sidney Prescott, and countless other women who have somehow managed to escape the fate so many of their friends and family members weren't lucky enough to. So, what makes these women final girls, and what messages can we take from them? Well, let's discuss. Final girls usually have quite a few similarities. It's what makes it a trope, after all. They are almost always women, looking at you, Tommy Jarvis. They are most likely a virgin, avoid sex, drugs, and alcohol, and remain fully clothed over the duration of the film. They will be smarter and more resourceful than their dead counterparts, and may even fight back against the killer before the end of the film, going from damsel to fighter. Many will also, over the course of the film, divulge the information about the terror they're experiencing, typically to a boyfriend, police officer, or man they trust, just to end up have them not really believe them, call them crazy, or just don't really do anything about it. That is until that man is forced to come face to face with the terror the final girl is explaining to them, often when it is far too late. This trope isn't hard and fast with all of these rules, but most final girls will have most, if not all of them. But if these are our final girl rules, what message does that deliver? Well, many people believe this trope reinforces the idea that women should remain virgins until they're married, not be promiscuous, dress conservatively, and be a good girl. And while yes, that messaging is there is a deeper message that the final girl also gives viewers. If I were to tell you that there had been a woman who was told to cover up, don't be promiscuous, and avoid situations where drugs and alcohol are being used, but she then experiences a trauma anyway, tells that trauma to someone who doesn't believe her until that person is forced to experience or see the trauma happening, and the woman was forced to try and resolve that trauma on her own because people wouldn't listen to her, what does that sound like? Because that is the final girl in many slashers, but it is also the lived experiences of many victims of sexual assault. We tell women to do all the same things to avoid becoming a victim of sexual assault, and when many of them do become victims, we end up not believing them. Heck, most slashers also use weapons that can penetrate their victims and are most often men. Scream is a great example to explain this just a little bit further. Sydney eventually has sex during the first Scream movie. This should be her death sentence because, as we've talked about, final girls need to be virgins. Heck, Randy in the movie describes the rules to surviving horror movies, which is basically describing what it takes to be a final girl, all while she is upstairs having sex. But she survives despite this. When we tell women to avoid being promiscuous, avoid wearing revealing clothes, and avoid situations where drugs and alcohol can be present, we are telling them these things to try and keep them safe, because we know that there are men who will do them harm, and it is nice to be able to protect yourself. But these are our rules for surviving, and when those men do eventually do harm, we also don't believe or blame the victims, because we also know those rules for surviving. And if we know the rules for surviving, and we try to then pass blame on someone for not following the rules, we are actively ignoring what caused them the harm in the first place and just trying to pass that blame off on them. We blame them for not being a final girl. They are just another victim of not following the rules. Just as Sydney is told she now has to die because she's not a virgin anymore. She broke the rules. When we place these rules on women, we are possibly giving them the idea that they should have known better when this happens. No victim deserves the blame for their abuse. No victim is partly to blame because they didn't follow the rules. We can use the final girl trope to help us better understand the lived experiences of victims of sexual assault, and we can use this trope to help us better understand how we, as a society, don't do all that great at believing and helping victims. If our final girls were believed or listened to, then movies would be much shorter, and we'd have far fewer victims. Just like if we believed our sexual assault victims, we would end up having far fewer victims. So, that's the final girl trope. Did I miss anything? Did I get it completely wrong? Let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed this short explanation of the final girl trope. I look forward to doing more of these, so thanks for watching, and happy spooky season, everyone.